Along North Carolina's coast lies a treacherous stretch of ocean that has swallowed thousands of ships. Known as the Graveyard of the Atlantic, it's one of the most infamous maritime graveyards in the world. These waters have claimed vessels of all kinds. Pirate ships, merchant vessels, warships, and even modern freighters, each with its own tale of disaster. But what makes this region so dangerous? Why have so many ships met their end here? And what stories remain hidden beneath the waves? In this video, we'll dive into the Graveyard of the Atlantic to uncover its mysteries. We'll explore why this area has been so perilous for centuries, and take a look at the unique geography and conditions that made it a nightmare for mariners, as well as the stories of a few notable shipwrecks that now lie scattered across its seabed. From the chilling history of Blackbeard's flagship to the tragic loss of U.S. Navy vessels, this is a place where the past and the ocean collide in haunting ways. Welcome to Shipwreck History. The Graveyard of the Atlantic stretches along the outer banks of North Carolina, a series of narrow barrier islands that extend into the Atlantic Ocean, but its scope reaches far beyond. The perilous region begins around Cape Hatteras, covering the waters to the south and east, including Diamond Shoals, a notorious spot which has claimed countless vessels. However, the term Graveyard of the Atlantic is also used to describe treacherous areas further north, such as Cape Cod in Massachusetts and Sable Island off the coast of Nova Scotia, both of which have a similarly grim history of shipwrecks. The Graveyard of the Atlantic earned its name for a reason. Navigating these waters is a harrowing challenge. What makes these areas so dangerous is a unique confluence of natural factors. The Graveyard of the Atlantic poses challenges just based on its geographical location. The Outer Banks lie in a region prone to hurricanes, tropical storms, and powerful nor'easters, each capable of creating massive waves and violent wind that can overwhelm even the sturdiest ships, destroying them within minutes. The waters in the region are where warm and cold ocean currents collide. Off Cape Hatteras, the warm Gulf Stream flowing northward from the Caribbean collides with the cold Labrador Current moving south from the Arctic. This meeting of powerful ocean currents produces violent swells and frequent fog, leading to unpredictable and challenging conditions. Unpredictable weather is not the only significant threat. The shoals off the Outer Banks, Cape Cod, and Sable Island turn an already dangerous journey into a lethal trap. These ever-shifting, underwater ridges are treacherous for ships that may get trapped if they stray close to shore. Grounding on a shoal could mean being stranded in rough waters, potentially running aground, or being smashed to pieces by relentless waves. Diamond Shoals near Cape Hatteras is the most infamous shoal off the coast of the Outer Banks. Over the years, it was named the Graveyard of the Atlantic's Heart for the high concentration of wrecks in this area. Further north, the currents and shifting sands around Cape Cod and Sable Island create similarly hazardous environments, with Sable Island's infamous sandbars earning its own nickname of the Graveyard of the North Atlantic. Even with modern sonar, the shifting seabed remains a challenge for mariners to this day. Natural hazards are not the only threat in the Graveyard of the Atlantic. Human factors have only amplified the dangers. Before the advent of radar, GPS, and satellite navigation, sailors relied on rudimentary tools like compasses, sextants, and charts, tools that were no match for the unpredictable waters of the Outer Banks. Navigational errors were common, especially in bad weather or fog, leading to tragic miscalculations. Historically, the Graveyard of the Atlantic served as a critical hub for trade, war, and piracy. The waters around Cape Hatteras were a major shipping lane for vessels carrying goods along the eastern seaboard, while Cape Cod and Sable Island saw significant maritime traffic in the North Atlantic trade routes. The convergence of major shipping routes along the eastern seaboard meant these treacherous waters were also heavily trafficked. This high volume of maritime activity increased the likelihood of collisions, particularly in the 18th and 19th centuries when steamships and sailing vessels shared the same waters. The region's importance as a trade and war hub further compounded the risks. Ships loaded with goods, troops, or weaponry not only found themselves at the mercy of the elements, but also in the crosshairs of pirates or enemy submarines in wartime. During wartime, the entire region became a battleground. Ships from both world wars met their fates in its treacherous waters due to submarine attacks, naval skirmishes, and mines. German U-boats hunted merchant and military ships along the Atlantic coast during World War II, adding to the wreckage scattered across the seafloor. The waters near Cape Hatteras would become known as Torpedo Junction for its role in global warfare. Pirates like Blackbeard plundered ships in the waters near North Carolina during the 18th century. The isolated nature of the region allowed pirates to operate with little interference. Ships off Cape Cod and Sable Island had fewer encounters with pirates, but more often experienced shipwreck scavenging. Local wreckers would often salvage cargo from ships stranded on the island's dangerous shoals. There were even rumors that some wreckers might have deliberately misled ships toward the shoals by using deceptive lanterns, though this practice is widely debated. The graveyard of the Atlantic has claimed countless ships over the centuries, each with a story to tell. Let's explore 5 notable wrecks that highlight the dangers, mysteries, and historical significance of these waters. The Carroll A. Deering is one of the most enigmatic shipwrecks in the history of the graveyard of the Atlantic. Built in 1919 in Bath, Maine, the 5-masted schooner was a state-of-the-art cargo vessel of its time and was designed to carry coal and other goods along the eastern seaboard. Commanded by Captain W.B. Wormel, the ship set sail in late 1920 from Norfolk, Virginia, bound for Rio de Janeiro with a cargo of coal. After successfully completing its delivery, the Deering began its return voyage to the United States in January 1921. What should have been a routine journey turned into one of the greatest maritime mysteries of the 20th century. On January 31, 1921, the Carroll A. Deering was discovered run aground on the treacherous Diamond Shoals off the coast of North Carolina. The ship was completely abandoned, with no sign of any of its crew. What made the discovery even more unsettling were the eerie details aboard the vessel. Meals appeared to have been prepared but left uneaten in the galley, personal belongings remained undisturbed, and the ship's navigation equipment and logbooks were missing. The disappearance of the crew sparked widespread speculation and numerous theories. Some believed it was an act of piracy, as the post-World War I era saw a rise in maritime crimes. Others suspected mutiny, pointing to possible tensions between the captain and the crew. A more supernatural explanation linked the incident to the Bermuda Triangle, despite the ship's location being far outside its boundaries. The U.S. government launched an extensive investigation involving multiple agencies, including the Coast Guard and the FBI. The investigation yielded no definitive evidence or explanations, and the fate of the crew remains a mystery to this day. The wreck of the Carroll A. Deering did not last long in its grounded state. Pounded by relentless waves and storms, the schooner was eventually broken apart and destroyed. Salvagers managed to recover some materials, but the ship itself was lost to the elements. Today, only a few artifacts and photographs remain to tell its story. Despite its physical absence, the Carroll A. Deering has left an indelible mark on maritime lore, capturing the imagination of historians and mystery enthusiasts alike. The USS Monitor, launched in January 1862, was a groundbreaking ironclad warship that changed naval warfare forever. Designed by John Erickson, it featured a revolutionary rotating gun turret, a low profile, and heavy iron armor, making it a formidable opponent. The Monitor quickly entered the history books during the Battle of Hampton Roads in March 1862, where it faced off against the Confederate ironclad, CSS Virginia, in the first-ever clash of iron-armored warships. The two vessels battled to a draw, but the Monitor's design demonstrated how antiquated the use of wooden warships was, and ushered in a new era of naval engineering. Despite its technological advancements, the Monitor was not without flaws. Its design was ideal for calm, inland waters, and it proved problematic in rough seas. On December 31, 1862, the Monitor was being towed southward to join Union operations off the coast of North Carolina. As it neared Cape Hatteras, a fierce storm struck. The ironclad's low freeboard left it vulnerable to towering waves, which quickly overwhelmed the vessel. Water poured into its engine room, rendering it powerless, and despite desperate efforts by the crew, it sank. 16 of the Monitor's 62 crew members perished in the disaster, marking a tragic end to the storied vessel. The wreck of the USS Monitor remained undiscovered for over a century, until it was located in 1973, off the coast of Cape Hatteras. The site was designated the Monitor National Marine Sanctuary, the first of its kind in the United States, ensuring the protection of this historic shipwreck. Over the years, extensive efforts have been made to recover and preserve key artifacts, including the iconic rotating gun turret, which now resides at the Mariners Museum in Newport News, Virginia. Perhaps no shipwreck ties the graveyard of the Atlantic more firmly to piracy lore than the Queen Anne's Revenge, the infamous flagship of the pirate Blackbeard. Originally built as La Concorde, a French slave ship, it was launched around 1710 and served as a vessel for the transatlantic slave trade. In late 1717, Blackbeard and his crew captured the ship off the coast of the Caribbean, refitting it as his flagship and renaming it the Queen Anne's Revenge. Armed with 40 cannons, the ship became one of the most feared vessels of the era, a symbol of Blackbeard's dominance during the golden age of piracy. The ship's time under Blackbeard's command was short but eventful. Blackbeard used the Queen Anne's Revenge to terrorize shipping lanes along the American colonies and in the Caribbean. In the spring of 1718, he famously blockaded the port of Charleston, South Carolina, holding prominent hostages for ransom. Soon after, Blackbeard's motives became less about expansion and more about consolidation. In June 1718, he deliberately ran the Queen Anne's Revenge aground near Beaufort Inlet, off the coast of North Carolina. Historians speculate that this was a calculated move to abandon his larger crew, reducing the risk of mutiny and allowing him to escape with a select group and a share of the loot. The ship's grounding ended its seafaring days, leaving it to the shifting sands of the inlet. For centuries, the Queen Anne's Revenge remained shrouded in mystery, its final resting place unknown. The wreck was rediscovered in 1996 and quickly identified based on its location and the artifacts recovered. The discovery was a significant archaeological find, offering tangible links to the notorious pirate and his exploits. Excavations at the site have yielded thousands of artifacts, including cannons, medical equipment, gold dust, and personal items belonging to the crew. These findings have provided rare insights into life aboard a pirate ship and the maritime history of the early 18th century. The wreck site of the Queen Anne's Revenge is now protected under state and federal law, ensuring its preservation. Even today, the story of Blackbeard and his flagship captures the imagination of many and offers a vivid window into the perilous and often brutal world of piracy during its golden age. The USS Huron, a Navy ironhold steamer, was a vital asset to the U.S. Navy during the post-Civil War era. Commissioned in 1875, the Huron was primarily tasked with surveying and charting the East Coast and the Caribbean, a critical role in improving navigational safety and supporting naval operations. The ship measured 175 feet in length and was armed with several cannons, a testament to its dual purpose as both a survey vessel and a lightly armed naval ship. Despite its sturdy construction and experienced crew, the Huron's fate was sealed by a combination of navigational errors and treacherous weather conditions. On the night of November 23, 1877, the USS Huron departed Hampton Roads, Virginia, bound for Havana, Cuba. As the vessel steamed southward, it encountered worsening weather, with strong wind and heavy seas. Unbeknownst to the crew, a critical navigational miscalculation had placed the ship perilously close to the shallow waters near Nags Head, North Carolina. In the early hours of November 24, the Huron ran aground on a sandbar just 200 yards from shore. Despite the proximity to land, the freezing November waters and powerful surf made it nearly impossible for the crew to reach safety. The ship's mast snapped, and the hull began to break apart under the relentless pounding of the waves. Of the 132 men aboard the Huron, 98 perished in the disaster. The majority of the deaths were caused by drowning or hypothermia, as the crew's attempts to swim to shore were thwarted by the frigid, turbulent waters. The tragedy shocked the nation, particularly as the ship had grounded so close to land. Public outrage over the loss of life grew when it was revealed that inadequate life-saving infrastructure along the coast contributed to the high death toll. At the time, the region lacked sufficient life-saving stations or rescue equipment to aid stranded sailors, a shortfall that became a focal point of reform efforts. In the aftermath of the disaster, the sinking of the USS Huron became a catalyst for significant improvements in maritime safety. Today, the wreck of the USS Huron lies just offshore from Nag's Head, a somber reminder of the perilous nature of 19th century seafaring. The site is accessible to divers, who can explore the remains of the ship in shallow water, making it a popular destination for those interested in maritime history. The wreck has been preserved as a historic site, offering a glimpse into the past and serving as a tribute to the men who lost their lives that fateful night. The U-701, a German U-boat, represents one of the many remnants of World War II, lying within the graveyard of the Atlantic. Commissioned in 1941, the submarine embarked on several patrols as part of the Germans' effort to disrupt shipping along the U.S. East Coast during the Battle of the Atlantic. The U-701 became notorious for its effective deployment of mines and its attacks on merchant vessels. Its most significant success came in early July 1942, when it mined the waters approaching Chesapeake Bay, resulting in the sinking of several ships and damaging multiple others. The U-701's reign of terror came to an abrupt end on July 7th. While operating off Cape Hatteras, the submarine was spotted by a U.S. Army Air Force's Hudson bomber. The aircraft launched depth charges, striking a fatal blow to the U-boat. The submarine sank quickly, taking 31 of its 48 crewmen with it. Of the 17 that escaped, only 7 crewmen survived and were later rescued, marking a rare instance of U-boat crew members being captured alive during the war. The incident highlighted the increasing effectiveness of anti-submarine tactics, which would eventually turn the tide of the Battle of the Atlantic. The wreck of the U-701 remained undiscovered for decades until it was located in 1989 by a team of divers. Resting in about 110 feet of water off the coast of Cape Hatteras, the submarine has since been designated a war grave, protected under international agreements. The site attracts divers and historians alike, serving as a poignant reminder of the fierce underwater battles that defined the Atlantic during World War II. The U-701's story underscores the strategic importance of the waters off the Outer Banks during wartime, and the enduring legacy of the graveyard of the Atlantic as a stage for both human ambition and tragedy. The graveyard of the Atlantic is more than just a final resting place of shipwrecks, it's a repository of maritime history. Stretching from the colonial era through modern times, the wrecks in this region offer a vivid timeline of changing shipbuilding technologies, trade routes, and naval warfare. Organizations such as the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration play a key role in studying and protecting these wrecks. The Monitor National Marine Sanctuary, for example, ensures the preservation of the USS Monitor for future generations, while supporting ongoing research and education. These ongoing efforts underscore the importance of balancing exploration with conservation. How many more secrets does this graveyard of the Atlantic still hold, waiting to be uncovered beneath the waves? The rugged coast of Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia hold a dark reputation. For centuries, ships have set sail into these waters, only to vanish, shattered against unseen reefs, or swallowed whole by raging storms. More than 2,000 vessels have met their end here, their remains scattered along the coast, earning this place a chilling name, the Graveyard of the Pacific. But what makes the Graveyard of the Pacific so deadly? And why have so many ships met their fate here? In this video, we'll explore what makes this stretch of coast one of the most dangerous and mysterious in the world, and take a look at several ships famous for being lost to the Graveyard of the Pacific. Welcome to Shipwreck History. Long before European explorers charted the Pacific Northwest, indigenous people had already mastered these perilous waters. Their massive cedar canoes, designed for both speed and stability, cut through the waves with precision. They relied on an intimate knowledge of the tides, shifting sandbars, and seasonal storms, skills that would later prove invaluable to those who would sail these treacherous coasts. The area was first explored by the Europeans in the 1590s when Greek explorer Juan de Fuca, for whom the strait between Washington and Vancouver Island is named, claimed to have discovered a vast inland sea, but his reports were largely dismissed. Nearly 2 centuries later, British explorer Captain James Cook arrived in 1778, battling violent swells as he searched for a safe harbor. He struggled to anchor along the rocky shore, recording in his journals how the unrelenting Pacific threatened to smash his ship against the cliffs. More explorers followed, drawn by the promise of new trade routes, but few of them understood just how unforgiving these waters could be. Ships ran aground, were torn apart by unseen reefs, or simply vanished, their fate sealed by the same brutal forces that had shaped the region for centuries. By the early 19th century, the Pacific Northwest had become a major hub for trading, whaling, and logging. Ships from the East Coast and Europe sailed into these waters, eager to exploit the region's vast natural resources. But the more vessels that passed through, the more fell victim to the graveyard of the Pacific. By the end of the 19th century, massive steamships joined the trade routes, carrying passengers and cargo up and down the coast. But even these steel giants were no match for these unpredictable waters. This stretch of water is a perfect storm of deadly conditions, where nature, geography, and even human error combine to create a nightmare. Beneath the surface, the seabed is a chaotic mix of shifting sandbars, jagged reefs, and deep underwater canyons. These features create unpredictable wave patterns, including deadly standing waves, waves that don't dissipate but instead surge and build, trapping ships in a relentless cycle. Sudden, violent storms can appear with little warning, turning calm seas deadly within minutes. Wind whips at hurricane force, and rain reduces visibility to near zero. Also lurking within these storms are rogue waves. Towering walls of water, sometimes over 80 feet high, have swallowed entire vessels without a trace. Even modern ships aren't immune. These freak waves hit with such force they can snap a hull like a toothpick. The Columbia River Bar, in particular, often called the graveyard of ships, became one of the most feared passages in the world. Shifting sandbanks and violent crosscurrents trapped vessels like flies in a web, leaving them stranded or torn apart by the waves. For early sailors, navigating these waters was a gamble. Lighthouses and foghorns were built along the coast to warn ships, but dense fog often obscured even the brightest beacons. Compasses became unreliable due to the region's magnetic anomalies, and mechanical failures left ships at the mercy of the currents. Even experienced captains miscalculated tides, ran aground on unseen rocks, or simply got lost in the relentless storms. In the days before GPS, a single mistake could be fatal. The graveyard of the Pacific's deadly reputation remains alive today, not just in historical accounts, but in local legend. Some say the spirits of lost sailors still haunt the shores, and eerie lights have been reported near old wreck sites. Haunted or not, the area has taken thousands of lives. The Columbia River Maritime Museum preserves their stories, keeping the maritime history and the dangers of the graveyard alive. Let's take a look at 3 of the ships that were lost along this treacherous stretch of coast. The SS Columbia was a state-of-the-art passenger steamer and one of the fastest and most luxurious vessels on the West Coast in the early 20th century. Built in 1880 by the John Roach and Son Shipyard in Chester, Pennsylvania, she was a revolutionary vessel for her time. It was the first commercial ship in the world to be illuminated by electric light bulbs, a groundbreaking innovation made possible through a partnership with Thomas Edison. The ship's installation of Edison's incandescent bulbs marked a turning point in maritime history, demonstrating the practicality and safety of electric lighting over gas or oil lamps, which were prone to fires. This advancement not only improved visibility for passengers and crew, but also set a precedent for future steamships, influencing the adoption of electric lighting across the maritime industry. She regularly ran the route between San Francisco and Portland, carrying travelers, mail, and cargo. On the night of July 20, 1907, the Columbia was heading north with 251 people aboard when disaster struck. Just after midnight, in dense fog off Shelter Cove, California, the steam schooner, San Pedro, emerged out of the darkness. Before either crew could react, the San Pedro slammed into the Columbia's starboard side. The impact tore a massive hole in her hull, and within moments, seawater was flooding in. Panic broke out as the ship began to list, Despite the chaos, some lifeboats were successfully launched, saving many passengers. But within 12 to 13 minutes, the Columbia vanished beneath the waves. More than 80 people lost their lives, many trapped below deck or thrown into the cold Pacific without lifeboats. The San Pedro was also heavily damaged, making it unable to assist in rescues. Instead, survivors were picked up by nearby vessels responding to the distress calls. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the maritime industry, leading to stricter safety measures, including improved lifeboat access and mandatory wireless communication on passenger ships. Today, the wreck of the Columbia lies nearly 50 miles off the coast of California, a haunting reminder of the dangers of navigating the graveyard of the Pacific, even for the most modern ships of the time. Among the many tragedies that have earned the Pacific Northwest coastline the ominous moniker Graveyard of the Pacific, the sinking of the SS Valencia stands out as particularly harrowing. Launched in 1882, the Valencia was a 1,600-ton iron-hulled passenger steamer, measuring 250 feet in length. Initially serving routes between Venezuela and New York City, she was later repurposed for coastal voyages along the U.S. West Coast. By 1906, the Valencia was operating between San Francisco and Seattle, a route that would lead to a tragic end. On January 20th, the Valencia departed San Francisco with 108 passengers and 65 crew members, heading north to Seattle. As the vessel approached the Juan de Fuca Strait, a severe storm descended, bringing with it powerful wind and dense fog that drastically reduced visibility. In an attempt to regain his bearings, Captain Oscar Johnson ordered the ship closer to shore, a decision that would prove fatal. Shortly before midnight on January 22nd, the Valencia struck a reef near Pachineau Point on Vancouver Island, approximately 11 miles from Cape Beale. The collision tore a massive hole in her hull, and the ship became impaled on the rocks, just 50 yards from the rugged coastline. Despite the proximity to land, the towering cliffs and violent surf made reaching safety nearly impossible. Chaos erupted as the crew attempted to launch the lifeboats. In the frenzy, most lifeboats were either improperly launched, capsized in the tumultuous seas, or smashed against the ship's side. Only one lifeboat is known to have successfully reached shore, carrying a handful of survivors who then faced the daunting task of scaling 100-foot cliffs to seek help. For over 36 hours, those remaining aboard clung to the deteriorating vessel, battered by relentless waves and freezing temperatures. Rescue ships arrived but were unable to approach due to the treacherous conditions. As the ship broke apart, many were swept into the sea. In the end, only 37 individuals survived, with all women and children among the 136 lives lost. The Valencia disaster prompted significant changes in maritime safety, including the construction of additional lighthouses and the implementation of more stringent navigational protocols along the perilous Pacific Northwest coast. The tragedy also gave rise to eerie tales, with fishermen later reporting sightings of phantom lifeboats, manned by skeletal figures. And in 1933, one of the Valencia's lifeboats was discovered floating in nearby Barkley Sound, remarkably well preserved after 27 years at sea. Today, the SS Valencia disaster remains one of the most harrowing and deadly tragedies in the graveyard of the Pacific. The wreck has significantly deteriorated, but parts of the ship have washed ashore over the years at what is now known as Valencia Bluff, near the site of the sinking. And though many of those lost were never recovered, the multiple memorials of the crew ensure they are never forgotten. The Peter Iredale was a four-masted steel ship, built in 1890, designed for long-haul voyages between the West Coast and Australia. By 1906, she was nearing the end of her service life, but was still seaworthy when she left Mexico, bound for Portland, Oregon, to pick up a cargo of wheat. As the ship neared the Columbia River on the morning of October 25, 1906, strong wind and a rising tide pushed her dangerously off course. Dense fog made navigation difficult, and before the crew could react, the Peter Iredale ran aground on Clatsop Beach. The impact forced the ship deep into the sand, breaking several of her masts. Fortunately, there was no loss of life. The crew safely reached shore, and the nearby Point Adams life-saving station provided assistance once they landed. Initially, there were plans to salvage the ship, but it quickly became clear she was stuck, and the effort was abandoned. Her captain reportedly turned to his stranded vessel, raised a glass, and made a toast. Over a century later, the remains of the Peter Iredale are still embedded in the beach, making it one of the most famous shipwrecks of the graveyard of the Pacific. It's a rare example of a wreck that's both deadly and harmless. A testament to the power of the Pacific, yet it's a shipwreck that claimed no lives. The graveyard of the Pacific has claimed thousands of ships and countless lives, earning its place as one of the most treacherous maritime regions in the world. Despite advances in navigation, radar, and shipbuilding, the forces that doomed vessels like the Peter Iredale, Columbia, and Valencia are still at work. Shipwrecks in the graveyard of the Pacific are rare today, but the risks remain. Even now, the Columbia River bar demands expert pilots, and sudden storms continue to test those who sail these waters. Beneath the surface and along the shore, the wrecks of the past remain, as silent reminders of how unforgiving the Pacific can be. The ocean doesn't forget, and for those who dare to cross its most dangerous waters, it never lets them forget either. The Great Lakes hold over 6,000 shipwrecks beneath the surface, but 5 locations stand apart from the rest. These aren't just accident sites, they're graveyards, where the lakes have claimed vessel after vessel, decade after decade. Each one earned its deadly reputation through a perfect combination of geography and weather that turns routine voyages into disasters. From sudden November gales that appear without warning, to hidden reefs that tear hulls apart, these killing fields have swallowed everything from wooden schooners to massive steel freighters. In this video, we're diving into the most notorious ship graveyards of the Great Lakes, where hundreds of captains made their final voyage and thousands of others never made it home. Welcome to Shipwreck History. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and help us get to 10,000 subscribers. Whitefish Bay sits at the eastern end of Lake Superior, where vessels funnel toward the Soo Locks and the safety of the lower lakes. It should be a place of relief for captains who've crossed Superior's open waters. Instead, it became the final resting place for some of the most famous vessels in Great Lakes history. The danger here comes from Lake Superior's most treacherous combination: sudden November storms that build with terrifying speed, hidden reefs that lurk just beneath the surface, and the false promise of safety when ships are still miles from shelter. Whitefish Point Lighthouse stands as a beacon of hope on the shoreline. Its 76-foot tower is visible for 25 miles on clear nights. But when November gales strike, visibility drops to zero, and even the most powerful lighthouse beam becomes useless. November storms on Lake Superior don't announce themselves with gradual increases in wind and waves. They explode across the lake with hurricane-force winds that can reach 90 miles per hour, building waves to 35 feet or higher. Ships that were making good progress suddenly find themselves fighting for survival in conditions that would challenge any vessel. The combination of wind, waves, and plummeting temperatures creates ice that forms on rigging and superstructures, adding dangerous weight that affects stability. This is exactly what happened to the Edmund Fitzgerald. On November 10, 1975, Captain Ernest McSorley reported increasing damage throughout the day as his ship fought massive waves. The fence rails had been torn away, ballast tank vents were missing, and both radars had failed. When asked about conditions, McSorley called it one of the worst seas he'd ever been in. His final transmission was, "We are holding our own," but 15 minutes later, the 729-foot freighter had vanished completely, taking all 29 crew members to the bottom, just 17 miles from safety. The November danger claimed vessels long before the Fitzgerald. In 1861, the sidewheel steamer Comet caught fire while carrying Civil War supplies through these same waters. The burned wreck later became a training ground for salvage divers. On August 20, 1920, the steel freighter Superior City collided with the steamer Willis L. King in Whitefish Bay. causing a catastrophic explosion when cold water hit her boilers. The Superior City sank rapidly, taking 29 of her 33 crew members with her. The steamer Vienna was inexplicably rammed in Whitefish Bay in September 1892. Tearing a large hole in her port side, the Vienna sank in fair weather with no loss of life, though her wreck would later claim the lives of 4 divers. In July 1909, the Zombie Cowl was rammed by the Isaac M. Scott in heavy fog off Whitefish Point, cutting the 400-foot freighter nearly in half. The Cowl sank in just 3 minutes, taking 14 of her crew members to the bottom. Hundreds of ships have been lost around the Whitefish Point area alone, making it the deadliest single location on the Great Lakes. Each wreck in these waters tells the same story. Whitefish Bay promises safety to ships that have survived hundreds of miles of open Lake Superior, but can deliver tragedy to those who arrive during November's fury. Thunder Bay, Michigan, is notorious for violent storms on Lake Huron. The name Thunder Bay first appeared on French maps in the 17th century, translated directly from the local indigenous name for the area. The real threat here is what lies beneath the surface. This area contains a maze of fixed limestone shoals that can tear ship hulls apart, combined with navigation patterns that force ships into an impossible choice between speed and safety. The geography creates a perfect trap. Ships traveling north through Lake Huron must navigate around Thunder Bay's treacherous shallow waters before making the crucial turn west toward the Straits of Mackinac. Captains face constant pressure to save time, especially during frantic late-season runs before winter ice shut down shipping. But cutting corners here meant sailing over reefs that could appear suddenly in fog or storms, turning routine passages into disasters. When heavy fog rolled in, which happened frequently, visibility dropped to zero while ships still needed to maintain speed to stay on schedule. Before radar, captains had to rely on charts and compasses. Even after radar was introduced in the 1940s, it couldn't detect reefs directly. Sonar can pick up the shoals, but in earlier decades, it was primitive or not used consistently. Add sudden storms to the mix, and Thunder Bay became a ship-sinking machine. The Great Storm of 1913 demonstrated this danger with devastating clarity. 2 massive low-pressure systems merged over the Great Lakes, creating what meteorologists called a meteorological bomb. Over 4 straight days, hurricane-force winds exceeding 90 miles per hour, combined with blinding snow to create whiteout conditions. The 500-foot steel freighter, Isaac M. Scott, while carrying coal to Milwaukee, fought these impossible conditions until the vessel rolled over and sank with all 28 crew members. The wreck lies upside down in 175 feet of water, its hull completely inverted on the lake bottom. But ships didn't need massive storms to die here. On August 9, 1865, the sidewheel steamer Pewabic was attempting to pass mail to its sister ship Meteor when something went tragically wrong. The Pewabic suddenly cut across the Meteor's bow, and the collision tore a massive hole in the hull. The steamer sank in less than 4 minutes with its valuable copper cargo, claiming an estimated 150 lives. The schooner D.M. Wilson, the freighter Monrovia, and dozens of other vessels all found their end in Thunder Bay's hidden maze. Each wreck tells the same story. The underwater landscape here doesn't forgive mistakes, and the navigation pressures guaranteed that mistakes would be made. Long Point extends about 25 miles into Lake Erie, creating one of the most deceptive navigation hazards on the Great Lakes. It's more than just a sandbar. Shoals and sandbars near the point can shift over seasons, making formerly safe passages dangerous. Lake Erie's shallow depth, averaging about 62 feet, makes storms especially lethal. Waves build quickly and become steep, leaving vessels little room to maneuver. Ships can encounter 15 to 20-foot waves that would challenge even large freighters, and the shifting bottom makes safe anchoring difficult. Winter adds another hazard. Ice forms quickly in the shallow water, but it doesn't form evenly. Pressure ridges and flows created real dangers for wooden vessels, and even steel-hulled ships risk damage if trapped. Captains caught in Long Point's waters during freeze-up often found themselves with no escape, forced to ride out storms in exposed positions. Pressure to finish late-season runs magnified these risks. Captains pushed ships through conditions they'd normally avoid, gambling against Long Point's unpredictable geography. The worst maritime disaster in Lake Erie history demonstrated this lethal combination. On August 20, 1852, the passenger steamer Atlantic collided with the propeller Ogdensburg in heavy fog near Long Point. The vessel was dangerously overcrowded with immigrants, many unable to follow commands from the crew. Chaos followed the collision, and between 150 and 300 people were lost, making it one of the deadliest shipwrecks in Great Lakes history. On December 8, 1909, the train ferry Marquette and Bessemer No. 2, carrying around 30 to 38 people and loaded with railroad cars, vanished during a winter storm. A lifeboat with bodies was found 15 miles off Erie, Pennsylvania, but the main wreck has never been discovered, and the mystery of her disappearance remains unsolved to this day. The whaleback steamer, James B. Colgate, sank off Long Point during the devastating Black Friday storm of October 20, 1916, taking 25 of its 26 crew members with her. Only the captain survived to tell the story. Each wreck underscores the same reality. Long Point's geography doesn't forgive mistakes, and the shallow lake magnifies every storm into a test of survival. The Straits of Mackinac form the narrow waterway connecting Lakes Michigan and Huron. At its narrowest, it is only about 5 miles wide, and every vessel traveling between the upper and lower Great Lakes must pass through this gateway. This choke point has made it one of the busiest and most dangerous passages on the lakes. Shipping through the straits has been vital since the 1800s, carrying iron ore, coal, and grain, with traffic increasing dramatically after the Soo Locks opened in 1855. Here, rocky shoals and reefs can severely damage ships that run aground. Powerful currents run through the channel, shifting direction unpredictably as the winds change. Fog is common and can quickly reduce visibility to near zero as fog banks roll in without warning, leaving captains disoriented in the shipping lanes. Radar helps vessels navigate, but it cannot compensate for strong currents. The schooner Sandusky went down here in September 1856 in a sudden November storm, fighting gale-force winds until she finally slipped beneath the waves. She rests upright, in about 80 feet of water, and though her replica carved figurehead still stands on her bow, the original was long ago recovered. The wreck demonstrates how even smaller sailing vessels could not survive sudden storms in the straits. On May 7, 1965, the 600-foot freighter, the Cedarville, collided with a Norwegian vessel in dense fog. The Cedarville capsized and sank within minutes despite the captain's attempt to beach her, taking 10 crewmen with her. She now rests on her side in 110 feet of water and is one of the strait's most famous modern wrecks. Other notable wrecks include the Eber Ward, which sank on April 20, 1909, after striking an ice floe in the Straits of Mackinac. One lifeboat launched successfully, while another capsized during the frantic escape. 5 of her 16 crew were lost, and 11 survived the disaster. On October 3, 1890, the steamer Fred McBriar, while towing schooner barges, collided with the propeller Progress in the Straits of Mackinac. The collision struck at midship, and the McBriar sank rapidly, but all crew members survived. The wooden sailing schooner, M. Stalker, sank on November 5, 1886, after being struck by a barge while anchored during a gale in the straits. Fortunately, the crew had time to abandon ship with no loss of life. These smaller ships faced many of the same risks as the largest freighters when forced through these congested waters. Each disaster underscores the same reality: modern navigation equipment, including radar and GPS, reduces but does not eliminate the dangers of the straits. The straits demand near-perfect navigation, and no captain can ever fully guarantee safety. Georgian Bay presents one of the most complex navigation challenges on the Great Lakes. It's a maze of over 30,000 islands, where a single wrong turn can lead to disaster. The danger here arises from the sheer impossibility of the task. Every deceptive channel that appears navigable becomes a dead-end trap. This isn't just difficult navigation, it's navigation that defies human capability. The islands create optical illusions where distances become impossible to judge accurately. Even experienced local pilots with decades of knowledge sometimes misjudge these deceptive waters. Weather exacerbates the challenge. Fog can roll in suddenly, reducing visibility to zero, while a ship is threading between islands with no room for error. Snow squalls in November create whiteout conditions, where captains lose all sense of direction. Strong winds can push vessels off course just enough to drive them onto hidden reefs that don't appear on any chart. The passenger steamer, Wabuno, learned this lesson on November 22, 1879. Carrying 24 passengers and crew from Collingwood to Parry Sound, the vessel disappeared completely during a massive snowstorm. Despite extensive searches involving multiple vessels and hundreds of volunteers, the wreck was eventually found, but the bodies of the passengers aboard were never recovered. While the wreck itself was eventually found, the Wabuno left behind one of the Great Lakes' most enduring mysteries. What exactly caused the disaster that claimed everyone aboard? In October 1895, the American cargo steamer, Africa, vanished with all 11 crew members aboard. The vessel was lost in an early October snowstorm, becoming one of Georgian Bay's many unsolved mysteries, until filmmakers discovered it in June 2023. In 1906, the coastal steamer, J.H. Jones, disappeared near Lion's Head with 30 passengers and crew, found only in July 2018 after more than a century on the bottom. The Africa, the J.H. Jones, and dozens of other vessels all discovered that Georgian Bay's island maze is also a ship-sinking labyrinth where one navigation error can mean tragedy. The graveyard of the Great Lakes tell the same story again and again. Experience, caution, and modern technology mean nothing when geography and weather combine against you. These 5 locations claimed vessels from every era, from wooden schooners to steel freighters, proving that the lakes respect no ship and will spare no crew. Each graveyard earned its reputation through a unique combination of dangers, but they all share one truth. They turned routine voyages into final journeys for thousands of sailors who never made it home. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share, and let us know in the comments what shipwrecks you want us to cover next. Don't forget to subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload, and until next time, keep exploring.